Now that we understand what arrays are, we're ready to start learning some of the functions that we can perform on arrays, because the power of arrays is going to really become evident once we start realizing what we can do with them and to them. Let's create a new workspace that we can work with. I'm going to save as for this file and make this one just be array functions. There we go. I'm going to change the title to be array functions as well. And I'm going to get rid of everything that's here except for that first array that I defined. And that'll give me an array that we can start by working with. There we go. Now I mentioned that arrays were going to be a lot more flexible than variables for a lot of reasons. Let's look at a couple of those. We can, for example, count the values. We can do something like PHP echo the count of array 1. And that'll tell us how many items are in the array, or how many pockets have been filled. We can also have the maximum value. And we can, once again, echo max array 1. And that probably makes common sense as well. And we can have minimum value. And it'll try and figure out what the minimum value in that array is. So let's go ahead and try those. Let's put some BR tags at the end here just so that it looks nice. And one more. There we go. Save the file, switch back to Firefox, and load up our new page, array functions. There we are. So there were 6 items in the array. The highest number is 42, and the lowest is 4. Now, one of the other things that's going to be very powerful about arrays that we can't really do with variables very easily is being able to sort them in order. And of course, we might want to just simply sort them from lowest to highest or from highest to lowest. And we can do that with sort and rsort. Rsort is for reverse sort. And I've gone ahead and given it the print R statement that we saw in the last movie, which will give us a readable printout of the array. So let's go ahead and bring that up and see what those do for us. And sure enough, the first one, it tells us what the array looks like, and they're already arranged in sorted order. We can jumble them around if you want to play with them. And reverse sort, which sorted them into the opposite order. And it actually changed the state of the array, so now the array is in the opposite order. Here's a couple that I find especially useful. A lot of times, especially if we're wanting to do a printout of array, we don't want to use print R in what we're giving to the end user. We're actually wanting to take a set of values and put them out in something that looks a lot nicer. We can implode it, and then we take an array, which is array 1, and we're going to use, I've told it to use the string space, asterisk space, to separate the values, and smash it all together to make a string, and we end up with string 1, and we're going to echo that back. And there's a counterpart to implode, which is explode. And that does the reverse. It's going to take the string 1 that we just created, find every instance of space asterisk space, and use that as the point at which to break up the values. So let's try it and see what we get for each of those. Notice that I echo back the string here, but I'm using print R because this explode is going to result in an array, and I want to get something that's going to be nice and usable. Okay, we'll do a return, and you'll see that implode took the value of my reverse sorted array and output them with the asterisk in between it. Explode took that same string, it was just a string, and broke it up so that the values were the things in between the asterisks. Now, it disregarded the asterisk in the process. That's just what it used to know what separates the values. A lot of times what you'll actually use this with are commas, and you might have a comma-separated list. And so you would have a comma-separated list of names. Maybe it's Kevin, Joe, Mary, Steve, and you want to break it up and make an array from that string. You could do that using the explode function. So I think both of those will end up being very useful for us. Now, there's also another function that's going to be very useful for us, which is going to be the inArray. And that's going to allow us to check and see if a value exists in an array. Now, in this case, we have numbers assigned, so I'm going to ask it if a number exists. But if it had been strings instead, we could ask it if a string existed in the array. And it's going to return to us true and false. And we'll talk about true and false in the next movie, but I wanted to go ahead and give you some exposure to it here so that you can see. We ask it, is it in the array? If we save it, and then we come back over here and we load it, it responds with nothing, which means that it's not in the array. But if we instead asked for the number 15, then it would be in the array, and it'll come back and it'll return 1. And we'll talk about Booleans and how those work in the very next movie. But this gives us a mechanism to actually search through an array and see if a value exists. So now that we understand how we can organize our data, put it into arrays, use arrays to hold lots of data for us, to manipulate it, to sort through it, it's going to become really useful to us when we start working with loops later on. Make sure you have a good foundation in arrays because they're really going to make your life a lot easier. And if you started programming with something like BASIC or something years ago, you may not be that familiar with arrays, but it's going to be an essential tool in your programming toolbox. And now we're ready to look at Booleans, or true and false statements, and the value of null. And we'll do that in the next movie.